We trust the lamb, not the donkey or the elephant.
Well, I think one of the things that you're putting your finger on is that the goal of parenting seems to have changed because I thought my responsibility for my kids, and I know my mom would definitely say this about raising me, was to raise an
Yeah.
independent adult. But it seems as if that parents almost want their kids to be more dependent upon them as if it provides some sort of psychological or emotional need. And I'm not thinking of any one person. I'm just thinking as a
Hmm.
culture.
Hmm.
I don't know if we're raising independent adults because if we are, then we want them to experience all the things that you were just talking about. A quick story is that I had some friends who were in town, and they're kind of a friend, honestly, and they were here visiting their college kids. It was parents' weekend, something like that, and everybody was meeting up at one of the bars downtown. And so these adults went down to meet their kids. It was late at night, and the most of the adults left, but one of the dads stayed and sat kind of over in the corner of the bar and just watched to make sure the kids were going to be okay for the rest of the evening because it was a little, a little spicy or chippy in the bar. And I heard that and I thought, hang on a second, you've got 21, 22-year-old kids who are off on their own, living out of state, going to college, but you as a parent feel like you need to stay there to keep an eye on them for this one Saturday night or whatever it was. And I just thought, what has happened? We have lost our collective mind. Now, I know that parent did it because they love their kid, but it
Right.
seems like we've changed the goal of what parenting is.
Yeah. Oh my God. There's so many things to say there. You think we've lost our mind. I think we've lost our faith.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Um, it's, I'll tell you a quick story and then we'll go back to how I don't blame helicopter parents. Just remind me, I like go off on so many tangents. I actually write note to myself like helicopter. But so one of the things I did a television show that nobody watched, and now it's on YouTube, and it's called World's Worst Mom. How appropriate. And what it was is the producers found me 13 families where the parents were just so crazed with worry. A mom who fed her 10-year-old in his mouth, right? A mom who let her son get a skateboard so long as he stood on it on the grass and didn't move, right? And a mom who would take her daughter into the ladies' room. She had to go to the bathroom and then stand in the stall with her so she wouldn't be molested by anybody. So it's just like over the top families. And then trying to recreate that here, I met up with a family in Queens, where I live, Queens, New York. And it's not all urban here. This was sort of a less urban part of the city. And the dad there had grown up in New Mexico with a twin brother, and they used to ride their horses bareback in the gullies. I can't even imagine this because I grew up in the suburbs, but bareback horse riding, you can imagine everybody, the mane's flying, the hair's flying. That's their childhood. There's rocks tumbling, whatever it is. It was pretty free range. So here he is, the dad now of a 12-year-old son and a 10-year-old girl, and he won't let them do anything on their own, including walk to or from the local school. And yet, parents don't like being that nervous. It's not fun. And so when I said, hey, does anybody want my services? I'll come and sit with you while we send your kids outside. He and his wife, who I think was a little more fed up, called me over. And what we did is we decided what would be good. Well, there's a grocery store 3 blocks away. Why don't they go and get juice? So I sit with the parents, and the dad is like this, but it's okay. And they keep looking like, are the kids coming back yet? Are the kids coming back yet? And, the kids come back like 15 minutes later and they got the juice, and it's a little celebration. Hooray, they got the juice. So fast forward 6 months later, I check in with them. How is everything going? And he said, it's amazing. My kid not only comes home by himself from school, but sometimes he stops at the park and he goes and he plays baseball with his friends or basketball. I can't remember. And he said, and he went when he was home in New Mexico with his cousin, who's a pastor. He said, I don't even understand what's changed about me, but I feel so much better, so much more confident, and my kids are happier. What is it? Ever since this little intervention. And the pastor said something good. He said, you were always a man of faith in God, but now you have faith in your children. And that's what it was. Parents. So the reason I'm not against helicopter parents, and even that poor guy standing, sitting in the corner while his 22-year-old drank a beer, is we've had the faith leached out of us. we've been told that our kids are in danger waiting at the bus stop, that you have to watch the whole soccer practice or your kids will feel bereft, that if you're not trick-or-treating with them, they're going to be molested, killed, or poisoned, that they should do a trunk or treat instead so that they're never knocking on any stranger's door and never interact with a person that you haven't personally background checked and photographed and, put a drone over their house. So when parents are told that their job is to be constantly in touch and supervising and assisting and intervening in their child's lives, and in fact, there are consequences if they don't. I mean, I talk to the parents who get investigated for child neglect because they let their kids play in the front yard. So when the society forces us to be helicopter parents, it makes us see all the stuff that our kids are doing that isn't optimal. Normally a parent wouldn't be with the frat boys at a bar when they're getting drunk. And so you don't see it, and then it goes on and the kids learn from it. I got so drunk last night, it was horrible, I threw up. And you don't normally see your kids arguing with each other about, whether the ball is in or out. I'll decide. You don't see the kid hitting the other kid over the head with the little toy shovel because they're allowed some free time. When we're with our kids, it's inevitable that we want to intervene because we see all the stuff that they're doing not as well as us, not as smart, not as safely as us. So I'm at a society that has made us constantly spend every single breathing moment either with our kids or somehow outsourcing, another adult to watch our kids or surveilling them from afar. But this constant supervision is why we're constantly intervening.
Well, I appreciate your book because one of the things that you do as you're talking about free range parenting is that you don't blame the parents. I mean, I'm not saying that you never critique or criticize parenting, but you don't walk away from the book as a parent thinking I'm failing. You more look and say, how am I being influenced by society and culture and the narrative and the media? And is this what I want for my kid? Is this what I want to do? Because some parents, like you said, are going over the top. I read a few years ago, you probably saw it too, the dean of Stanford, a woman, was talking about how much parents are trying to interfere with their kids' college entrance requirements, meeting those, writing the essays, all that kind of stuff. And here's what she said. Her name is Julie Lythcott-Hames. I hope I pronounced it right. But she said, we want so badly to help them by shepherding them from milestone to milestone and by shielding them from failure and pain. But overhelping causes harm. And I think if a parent could see that overhelping your kid, it really produces immaturity and anxiety, a lack of confidence. And I just don't think parents see that part of it. And I think that's part of what your book does is says, hey, you can trust your kids and there will be so many benefits from doing that and letting them explore and experience a little bit of life without you around them all the time. So you mentioned helicopter parenting, snowplow parenting.
All the words,
Are those terms that you use, you find helpful? Do people know what they mean? Do you mind unpacking those just a little bit for us in case people don't know what they mean?
I'll unpack them and then I'll give my solution to the problem. So helicopter parenting, I don't know when the term began, but it's definitely been in the 2000s. And it's the idea that you're sort of hovering over your kid, and snowplow parenting is the idea that you're clearing the path for them. And in Canada, they call it curling parenting because it's the same idea. You're just sweeping away all obstacles or even tiny little specks of ice. But all those are once again blaming the parent for a social norm that you can barely buck, right? I mean, if all the other parents are waiting with their kids at the bus stop, you not waiting with your kid can look like you're the jerk who's like freeloading, right? Or if you don't want to sit at the soccer game, how come you're not there, Mrs. Skenazy? Your son is in the game. So it's, it feels like all those terms only make people feel ashamed and angry. And so I don't see a real upside to them, although I'm sure I've used them plenty myself. The thing that is true is that you cannot be a non-helicopter parent in a helicopter parenting society unless it's a collective action, unless there's some other people who believe as you do or who are trying as you are to step back a little. So 5 years ago, two really smart people came to me, a guy named Dan Schuckman, who was chairman of a group called FIRE, which fights for free speech on campus, and Professor Jonathan Haidt, who is at NYU, and he's written a bunch of books, but the most famous is called The Coddling of the American Mind, which I bet you read.
He wrote you the introduction or the foreword to your...
Well, he wrote the foreword because a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, he and John and Dan were talking about what they were seeing was that young people coming to college seemed fragile. They seemed easily hurt and sort of unable to solve some of basic, simple problems on their own, an argument with a roommate, a mouse in the dorm. The mental health services on campus were being overwhelmed. And I believe in seeking help when you need it. So I'm not against that, but I also feel bad that so many kids felt bad enough that they thought that they needed, professional help. And the big thing that they noticed is that when somebody felt uncomfortable, including when there was somebody coming on campus who was giving a speech and they were too far to the right or too far to the left, instead of going and raising your hand and saying, excuse me, I read the opposite, and engaging, or avoiding the speech because you don't like the guy and you think he's a jerk, instead of either of those sort of active decisions, they were claiming to be unsafe and insisting that the person not come or needing a trigger warning on a book. And the idea is like, when you're uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean you're unsafe. And they were so, Dan and John were saying, like, this is not something that happens suddenly when kids are 18 years old, that they start feeling fragile and like any encounter that is not pleasant and easy is too much for them to bear. It must be starting younger. Who is countering a culture that is making children fragile? And that's when they came to me and they said, let's start a nonprofit together. And I said, well, first I said no, because I didn't think I could run a nonprofit, which is true. Thank God now we have an executive director. But I said, the other thing is that we have to devote ourselves to changing behavior, because simply changing minds doesn't help. I mean, it helps a little, but if you want to if Keith decides he's going to send his kids, to play in the park and there's nobody there for them to play with, and somebody's calling 911 because they saw an escaped child out there.
And that happens.
Yeah, it does happen, unfortunately. You can't let your kids have this kind of freedom. So we have to figure out a way to make this a group effort on the part of parents and re-normalize the idea of giving kids some independence. And so we started the nonprofit called Let Grow. And that's where you'll find me most of the time. Free Range Kids usually says, why don't you go over to Let Grow? Because that's where I'm blogging more. And that's why we have a Let Grow Twitter feed. Anyways, everything is Let Grow, Let Grow. And so Let Grow has two school initiatives that we think are really going to change things. And we've seen some evidence of it so far, but not enough. One is that if a school assigns the Let Grow project, things really change. The project is this: kids get a homework assignment. Look, Mom, it says, I have to do something by myself without my parents. And all the parents are getting that same letter.
And what age are the kids?
K through 12.
Okay, so it's different assignments depending on what age the kid is.
It's actually not an assignment per se. There's a list of potential things you could do, but it is so tiny compared to the number of things you can really do.
Right. Just some suggestions.
Walk the dog, make dinner, go visit grandma, ride your bike, volunteer. There are things that you do, preferably either difficult things in the house that you've never done, make a whole meal or something like that, or outside the house is even better.
But it sounds like you're trying to give parents permission to do
that's it,
right? You're trying to say, this is okay. The school said to do this, and therefore they takes the pressure off of them to hyper monitor their child. I love it.
Exactly that.
I love it.
It's so great. It's free. All our materials are free. And it's not only takes the pressure off, it puts the pressure on, right? Everybody's doing it. The school says you have to. There's a little note home that we provide all this stuff that says why it's good for kids to have some independence. And then the kids start comparing notes. Oh, I got to go get ice cream. You're kidding. I got to rake the leaves. So, and then sometimes my favorite story about this is that there was one school that was doing this. Actually, one whole district with 7 schools was doing it. And then the principal from one of the schools sent me an email she'd gotten from a friend in another district showing her the Let Grow project that her son had done. And it was on Facebook bragging, my kid did, I can't remember what, I think it was actually raking the leaves. And I said, that's good. She said, no, that's not my school. they saw on Facebook that all these kids were doing independent things, and the parents at the other school started complaining, hey, how come our kids aren't? And I really feel like it is something that is ready to go viral, and it has in the neighborhoods where it's begun, but it hasn't begun in most neighborhoods. So the reason I go on podcasts like yours is to hope that anybody hearing this, especially if you have a kid in school, you're a teacher, a principal, a guidance counselor, a psychologist, whatever, suggest that the school try the Let Grow project. Because I said, everything's free and it's all laid out there. And we've seen amazing things happen. Actually, one girl, they're all nervous. One 7th grader said she finally convinced her mom to let her walk to church one day by herself. And she said she was so proud because it was such a grown-up thing and she felt great. And after that, she did all sorts of other things. She got her ears pierced and she tried out for the swim team. But what she said was so interesting. She said it changed her relationship with her parents because they started seeing her as more mature and ready and grown up and a girl in the world. And she started understanding her parents' life because she had younger sisters. And she saw, how boring and how much time it takes to always be going to every activity, expected to be there. And she said she and her parents started arguing less and understanding each other more. And I think it's because kids don't want to be underestimated, right? And once you let them do things on their own, you get confident in them, and then they rise to the occasion, and it just changes everything for the better. Parents don't feel like they're unnecessary or unimportant.
Yeah.
It feels like they've done a good job.
Hey, I'm Keith. Thanks for watching the video. If you're interested in ending tribalism like we are, we have a podcast and a book. Both are called Truth Over Tribe. You can listen to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, and you can get the book off Amazon. I hope you'll check them out.